What's going on, everybody? We are back with another episode of the Escalate podcast. I am very, very excited for everyone to dive into this episode and for you guys to listen to this episode because I get to sit down and talk to my personal business coach, Joe Rinaldi. Joe is a marathon runner. He is a strength coach. He's a physical therapist. And I think that he has done a fantastic job in explaining in our conversation how to scale your business while still maintaining proper client communication and client retention, as well as kind of the strategies that he's used using social media to give a push towards his business to the point where Project Endure, which is his coaching company, is recognized across Philadelphia, across Pennsylvania as a whole, across the Northeast, and kind of across the country in a way. Now, while Joe is primarily a general fitness / strength coach and a running coach where he has, a ton of clients doing marathons, half marathons, and even ultra marathons, despite that, I do think a lot of powerlifting coaches are going to have a great understanding and learn a lot from what he has to say. So I am really, really excited for you guys to dive into this episode. But before that, I do need to give a quick shout out to 110% and Kevin Papa. As you guys know, Kevin supports both me and the podcast with 110%. If you guys would like to try anything, whether it be the pre-workout, whether it be sleep supplements, carbohydrate supplements, creatine, anything like that, click the link in the bio. You can use code ROB, and that will get you a discount at checkout. And then lastly, if you have ever wanted to work with me, I am currently taking on clients until around the end of September. It's just as the school year starts up, I want to make sure that I have the time to properly communicate with my current clients, and taking on any more past September would, I think, impede on that ability as school ramps up, as travel ramps up for me, going to conferences, and as I prepare for my qualifying exams. So with that being said, there are around 2 spots available. If you have ever been interested in that, go ahead and click the coaching inquiry link in the description below. That will take you to a jot form that you can fill out, and then we can link on a one-on-one call where you can learn a little bit more about me and a little bit more about what I offer with Escalate. But without further ado, we'll hop into the episode. This is episode 13 or 14, I don't remember, of the Escalate podcast. I want to ask, how's the Celsius on Jess's race?
So that's still the only Celsius I've ever had, and it was good. Don't get me wrong, but I have to say, I think I prefer White Monster. I don't know if that's controversial or not.
I don't think it's controversial at all.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people prefer White Monster.
It felt too healthy. Like if I wanted something healthy, I wouldn't be drinking an energy drink.
That's so funny.
But the White Monster is my go-to. And Celsius wasn't bad though. Close
That's
second.
funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. I had talked to you about, kind of in introducing you to what we're doing on the podcast, how I, kind of pin you as a running coach.
Mm-hmm.
You do a lot, right? But I kind of, that's my archetype of you. I'm like, oh yeah, it's Joe. He's my business coach, but he's also a running coach. It's what he primarily does. Is that how you saw yourself being? Did you run in college or in high school? I don't think I've ever talked to you about your athletic career.
Yeah, so I grew up playing baseball primarily. And then when I was in the range of 10 to 12, I really started to lose some of my sight because of the condition that I have. And so baseball became more challenging, got hit in the face with a couple fly balls, and pivoted to football. Football was great because, one, you don't need to be able to see a tiny little ball. You can kind of just follow people. And two, I never would have pegged myself as an aggressive person, but there's something about being out on a field where you're allowed to just hit people that was really, I guess, cathartic for me. So fell in love with football, through football, got introduced more and more to the weight room, fell in love with that. And at the same time was exposed to running just because that's what the sport was. And we did a lot of conditioning, but running was always punishment, for sport, at least for me. It was, you have a bad game, bad practice, you're running sprints at the end, you have to get in shape for the season. You have to run. You don't look forward to running. And that was always my relationship to running. until I would say right before the pandemic, I started to see other people on social media. I started getting into running, and it took a while to feel that runner's high for the first time. And once I found it, I thought, oh, great, this is what every run's going to feel like. And it's not the case. It's very elusive, but I fell in love with the process. So over the past 5 years, I've really fallen more in love with running to the point where now I run every single day for the past 2+ years.
Yeah, I was talking to you at the Ambassador weekend. What was it? Almost a year and a half ago at this point. Which is
Yeah.
crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Um, and you had I think you were just before a year straight of running.
Mm-hmm.
You're like day 350 something or 340 something. And you were like, yeah, I think I'm gonna hit it on vacation. I'm like, well, that's a bit cathartic, isn't it? Um, how did you think of that idea? Was that something that just popped in your head and you were just like, I think I'm just gonna run every day for the rest of my life?
It's interesting. It started actually as a challenge that I was running for Project Endure in an attempt to get more engagement and to scale the community and the coaching. And so we were doing these monthly challenges. It was as many push-ups as you wanted to do every single day for a month. It was however many minutes of cold showers every single day for an entire month. And then the month of April 2022 was run at least a mile every single day for the whole month. And when I got to April, my extreme addictive personality kicked in, and I thought, well, I'm already 30, 31 days into this. I might as well keep going. And the longer I went, the more I realized I'm probably not going to stop this unless something catastrophic happens to me. And so here we are, 847 days later, and I'm still doing it. And I've loved most days. Don't get me wrong, there are hard parts, and that's the point. But I really enjoy getting out every single day for at least a mile.
Yeah, do you have anything planned for the big 1000? Is it gonna be like a big stair workout with the Project Nadir team or
So two things on that. One is I'm kind of bummed because the 1,000 day mark falls, I believe, on January 2nd of
oh,
2025. Like I couldn't, like it would have been perfect if I timed it up for January 1st, 2025. But no, I actually think I'm more in this season of life where I'm really attracted to the idea of just going out, running it, maybe not even posting on my Instagram story about it and just doing it for me. There's something about doing the work and not sharing the work that's really challenging and also really attractive to me because I think so much of the past couple of years have been me just sharing most of what I'm doing. And sometimes I get sucked into that mode of let me do this so I can share it. And I almost want to go in the opposite direction of let me just do this and not even share it because it's not for the world anyway. It's really for me. I'll probably keep it quiet.
that's cool. I like that. I think obviously a lot of people in the fitness industry struggle with that, not sharing aspect because it's kind of our job at the end of the day to share stuff. But you talked about how a majority of your life was sharing that stuff. What has the majority of your life been? Who is Joe Rinaldi? Who are you? A lot of my listeners probably don't know who you are. We kind of just hopped into conversation, but give me a little bit about yourself. I know that you're a DPT, you're an online coach, business owner, obviously a runner. 800 something days in a running every day.
That was Rob. First, before I introduce myself, that was an incredibly smooth transition from podcast host to podcast host.
Thank
That
you.
was that was smooth. Yeah. So I do all the things you said. I have a lot of titles and I wear a lot of hats, but I would be doing a disservice to who I actually am if I didn't mention first that I'm a man of faith and I'm a husband and I'm a son, a brother, a friend, a dog dad. I think those human aspects of who I am and what I do are more important than the professional side of things. And it's really easy for me to get wrapped up in I'm a coach, I'm a business owner, I'm a physical therapist. And so I am all those things, but beneath all those things, I just see myself as Joe Rinaldi, the person. And that's really what I'm striving to embrace is how can I be the best version of me as a person, as a husband, a brother, son, friend, and then on top of that also be a really good business owner, physical therapist, coach. And I actually think that by putting things in that order, I am better professionally when I'm better personally first. And I can dive into this as we get toward this part of the podcast, but to me, being a good coach or a great coach really starts with being a great friend to somebody. And so that's a little bit about who I am, and I'm happy to dive into any part of that that you want.
Yeah, so a lot of my my audience, I think, in powerlifting, we put a huge emphasis on physical therapy. And a lot of the coaches that I look up to personally, one of my, good friends, Dev, who I've had on the podcast, shout out to him. John Song, who's actually, I think, up in New York. He's pretty close to you. Both of them are physical therapists. Both of them are, regarded as Keenan Dung as well. Both of them are regarded as like kind of some of the best coaches in the game. Um, However, I think there's this weird transition, right? You worked in the clinical PT space, right? Like you were in a sports medicine hospital or in a straight up hospital. What was that switch like for you? Did you always know that you wanted to work as your own boss, quote unquote? Because at the end of the day, our clients are our boss. Let's be honest here. Um, or was that something that just kind of came along the way with
Mm.
Project Endure?
It's a good question. I'll start with I realized that I wanted to be a physical therapist about halfway through undergrad. And so I actually transferred schools from Bucknell University to Rutgers University so that I could study exercise science specifically. I worked as a performance coach while I was at Rutgers getting that degree. I went to physical therapy school, started my online coaching business a little bit while I was in school, but really focused on my studies, got out of school, got my first job. I think I started my first. So it's actually interesting. I graduated from school. I gave the speech for my class at graduation. I proposed to my now wife 2 or 3 days later. And then I started my first job 2 or 3 days after that. It was a whirlwind of a week. But yeah, I was working for somebody else. I was in an outpatient physical therapy clinic, and it was insurance based. I actually really enjoyed the first year. I was very eager, had a lot of that new grad energy where I just wanted to get out there, just treat a lot of patients. And I loved the people that I got to work with. However, COVID came along, things slowed down, and it was that transition from the frantic pace of day to day, just seeing patient after patient, to everything coming to a halt. It was that space that allowed me to realize that I didn't love the pace that I was moving at, that I was working at, because I couldn't be there for people the way that I wanted. A great example of this is I had a new patient. So patient comes in for an evaluation. Long story short, I just ask them, how are you doing? Tell me a little bit about yourself to start things off. And this person just starts crying. And I sat there. I did what I knew how to do as a human, not as a physical therapist. I just listened. I gave them tissues. I was there for them. And at the end of an hour, they finished explaining all of these horrible things that were happening in their life, and time was up. I didn't do anything. I didn't measure anything. I didn't gather any information. I didn't bill anything for the insurance, and I got in trouble for that because I didn't bill anything. I didn't make any money for the clinic in that hour, but that's not what that person needed. And so there was this very real tension between what I felt I wanted to give people and what this business model was built off of. And so that started the wheels turning in my mind. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by other entrepreneurs, and over and over and over again, I would have these conversations, and people who ran their own businesses would say, hey, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's also the most rewarding, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I had enough of those conversations where I eventually built up the courage to just take that leap. And in reality, it was a slow build. I had my online coaching, I was building up my book of business, and it was a very calculated risk, but it was a risk nonetheless. So, about 2.5 years into full time work as a physical therapist, I left the clinic and started Project Endure. And fast forward 3 more years, and here we are.
Very cool. Before we hop into what Project Endure is, I want to ask, just because I'm genuinely curious. A lot of pain obviously is psychological aspect. I think of pain as three-prong: environmental, physical, and psychological. What environment you're in, the actual like nociception of like nerve endings, etc., and then how you think about the pain, if you're guarding it, etc. Did you see a difference in that one client? I don't know if you can recall in that one client's pain after they kind of possibly let go of those feelings.
I'm so glad you asked, because yes, they got better in 2 or 3 sessions and they
Yeah.
were out
See,
the
it's
door. And
like
it was so efficient, right? Like that's what they needed to build the buy in, the trust, and just it was therapeutic for them to talk about it.
Yeah, that's super cool. Do you see that with your clientele as well? Have you had those kind of like hard conversations with clientele? Not maybe in the aspect of physical therapy, obviously. I'm not sure if you do telehealth stuff or not. But more so in the aspect of like maybe getting buy-in with clientele. As soon as you kind of maybe break down your walls or they are allowed to break down theirs, there's a sense of trust that builds.
Absolutely. And I think I can give the blanket example of somebody who says they want to do something. Let's say in this case, it's a fitness or a running goal. And they say, I want to run this fast. I want to run this race, et cetera, et cetera. We lay out the plan. Okay, here's what they need to do. We're clear on it. We're committed to it, both of us, me and the client. 3 weeks in, they're not doing the work. It would be very easy for me to say, hey, man, hey, Rob, like you said you were going to do this. You're not doing it. You need to do better. And just period, end it there, hard accountability. Uh, but a lot of times what people need is like, hey, Rob, I noticed that you haven't hit your runs this week. Like, is everything okay? Like, what's going on? And, maybe somebody just lost their job. Maybe somebody's going through trouble in a relationship. Maybe somebody's just having a down season of life and they just need someone to have a little bit of softness, empathy, care, compassion. And that's enough to make them say, you know what, actually, Joe does care. I care about this process. Let me get back to it, even though I fell off a bit. So yes, I think that that empathetic side of being there for people is incredibly valuable in the coaching relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's something that I personally struggle with 100%. If I can, is actually the client that follows you that I notice that follows you, Jared Levinson. If I can shout him out real quick, I think he's the youngest assistant principal in New York City history. He's like, I think he's my age, and he's assistant principal at a high school, which is crazy. Um, he is, a man of God and in a loving relationship and everything, and I think he's also finishing his like grad school or like he does these summer programs at Columbia for like becoming a like administration or principal and everything. And he's finishing up his second summer of doing that. And you would think as, a teacher, because he taught math prior, during the school year as his coach, it's hectic because, he's coaching, he's coaching basketball, football, baseball, whatever he can, helping in the weight room for these young kids because he's somebody that they look up to. And then, during the summer, you're like, okay, cool. We can have some time to chill. We can get some quality training done. No, I'm going to do this thing. And not until recently have I realized that I need to be that kind of shoulder. Because before I'll be honest, I would be pretty harsh on him. I'd be like, dude, the hell are we doing? Like, you need to train these days. It's very important. You have these goals. You need to do this. And I think that learning how to be that empathetic shoulder, that person to lean on, can be hard because from the coach's perspective, we see the goal and we see every step and we plan out those steps. And when those steps are not, taken because of something personal, it's hard not to take that personally because you're just like, okay, what are you doing? You wasting my time? Like, what's going on? But to your point, we don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know if, again, they lost their job, if they lost a family member, anything like that. So I think it's a very, very important thing to understand. And I'm really glad that you were able to share that with us because it's something that I think a lot more young coaches need to know. Because again, alongside the client education aspect that I always talk about, we will always be more educated than the client. Like, let's just be honest. Unless we are, talking about one specific thing that they might have experience with, we'll always be more educated than the client. Where we come in primarily is in the regulation. And that comes again in multiple ways with emotional, physical, and whatever else. So I'm really glad that you hit on that. But you've talked about Project Endure enough for me to now ask you what the hell Project Endure is. If you want to
Yeah,
dive into that a little bit, that'd be awesome.
of course. So Project Endure is my business. I'll start by saying when I started Project Endure, I had no idea what it was. 3 years later, I still have very little idea of what it is or where it's going, but I do know a few things. And so to back up and give a little bit more context, I grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, had a great childhood. We talked a little bit about sports. I have this genetic eye condition that's causing me to lose my sight. It's called Best disease. And the reason I mention that is because it's a struggle that I don't get to choose for myself. It's something that I can't change. It's something that makes life challenging in many ways. And I live with that. For a long period of my life, I felt like the victim. I felt sorry for myself. I let this hold me back. I was angry at the world. And it wasn't until I met my now wife that I had a season of life where my perspective flipped. And I went from feeling sorry to myself to taking ownership over what I could control. And the big thing that we can all control is our perspective. And that's a choice that we get to make every single day. And so I share that because Project Endure is about helping other people find strength within the struggle. And that struggle could be a struggle that they didn't choose. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be a challenging physical injury, illness, or condition. It could be anything that's hard that they didn't choose. And it can be something that they did choose, like a race or an event or a challenge, an adventure. And I think that those two kinds of hard are different on the surface, but deep down, they're the same, right? There is no strength without struggle. And Project Endure is about helping people find strength in their struggle. And so, with that, at the very beginning, it was simply an LLC and an umbrella for me to put all of my coaching work underneath, nothing more. As I started to put the idea of Project Endure out there, I shared the mission a bit. I shared the motto, which is do hard things. I started to get people who were reaching out and interested in being a part of it, interested in helping, volunteering their time, interested in just learning more. And so I realized that there were people out there who wanted this, needed this, wanted to be part of it. And because of that, I just started inviting people into whatever it is that I was doing. I mentioned those monthly challenges. That was something that I started from the very beginning. You know, we had, I think our first monthly challenge was cold showers every day for whatever period of time you wanted to define for yourself. I think we might have had 15 people in that. Fast forward a year to our first full year of business, we're doing things like the run every day for a month challenge. And we have, 50, 75, 100 people who are taking part in those challenges. And I realized that there was a desire for this type of group and community and being around like minded individuals. And from there, I just leaned into that. One of the biggest secrets, even though it's not a secret of Project Endure, is it's just a collection of good human beings who all want to grow. And it really is that simple. And coaching is our business. We have a podcast, we do community events, but it's really just about collecting good people who want to do hard things. And so 3 years in, we have over 100 clients on a monthly basis. We have a couple coaches who are working with clients in addition to me working with the bulk of clients. We've held 3 annual events with 45 people, 125 people. This year we had 250 plus people. And we do a lot of things that just revolve around bringing people together to have some fun and to grow. And so I can go more into detail on any of that, but that's Project Endure in a nutshell as it stands today.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. And I appreciate you sharing your personal story with that, with your condition. I think it's something that, and I mean this in a good way. I mean this in the best way. It's something that you make people forget about,
Mm,
if that makes sense. And I think that's really cool. And I don't know if you mean to do that, but when I think of Joe Rinaldi, I don't think of, oh, it's that guy that's going blind.
mm.
I think of the coach, I think of the runner, I think of, the athlete. I don't think of the condition. And I'm not sure if that was your intent, but and I'm not sure if you even like that, to be honest. But I think it's really cool because I think a lot of people get attached to, titles and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that you're able to look beyond that and kind of put your mark on the world as something more is really, really cool. Um I want to talk about so you said that you have 75 to 100 people in these challenges. I obviously wouldn't believe that all of those are clientele, right?
Mm.
Um, where do you find the balance between this community building and content creation on social media and actually being able to like be a good coach and provide, great training and communication to your clients?
Sure. So there's a lot that comes to my mind when you ask those questions. So I'll throw it out there, and then if you want to ask some follow-ups, I'm
Yeah.
happy to organize it. But I'll start by saying I want Project Endure and what we do to be inclusive. I want anybody and everybody who wants to be a part of what we're doing to be able to be a part of it. And that means making the podcast accessible. It means opening up workouts on a monthly basis completely for free. It means doing challenges for free. It means, throwing content out on the internet for free that I hope adds value to people who are consuming it and taking part in everything that we do. With that being said, it's also a business. And so the main part of our business and how we make money is through coaching. I've taken a very low slash no pressure approach to sales. And what I mean by that is my strategy has just been be authentic, be consistent, add value to people through all of the things that I just mentioned. And at the same time, let people know what I do, let people know what we do, let people know that if they'd like to work with us, if they'd like to go to that next level, coaching is available. And I'm very open and willing to have those conversations with anyone. If you're interested in learning more, I'll happily hop on a call and end the call by saying, there is no action I need you to take from this call. I just want to answer your questions. And that's the truth. And so that's kind of how I've navigated the community with the coaching clients. However, I think it's important that there are boundaries in place because paying clients who are receiving coaching services, they are paying for a higher level of attention, knowledge, guidance, accountability, etc. So my coaching clients essentially have 24/7 access to me. And I say 24/7 and laugh a little bit because it's more like maybe 27 or 18/7. If you catch me between the hours of 4 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm all yours. I'll respond right away. Anything that you need. And there's that higher level of you need something, I got you. Whereas in the community, I have to be more careful maybe with my time. I can't give that level of attention to everyone. And so there's a boundary that I have to set. But in terms of converting community members to clients, it's very much something that I want to make appealing and attractive so that people want to do that rather than a pressure situation where people feel like they need to or should be doing that, if that makes any sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. When it came to building this community and kind of building your client base, did you see a specific, like, I don't know, big boom, I guess is the only way that I can put it, at any point with content creation? Or was it
Mm.
more so like how does that tie in? Because you're very consistent on social media as well. I want to talk about that side of things. It's what you and I have talked about probably most in our coaching together. I don't even think I mentioned this, but for the people that don't know, Joe is my business coach. I think we totally glossed over that.
Mhm.
But it's something that you and I have talked about probably more than anything when it comes to me trying to scale is
Mhm.
just consistently getting out content. And I think that's one of the only ways, if not the only way, to get an online business off the ground nowadays. Was
Yeah.
there some point where you were like, okay, this is when I know I've got it down with social media, or was it kind of a continuum of figuring out new things, maybe some educational content, maybe some motivational content, all that kind of stuff?
So, couple things. One, I heard this just last week, but if lottery tickets were free and all you had to do was go to the convenience store and pick them up, I bet every single one of us listening and in this conversation would go to the convenience store at some point today and pick up a free lottery ticket because, it's just a little bit of effort and the payoff could be huge. I think posting in social media is similar, right? Like, yeah, it's a little bit of effort, but you never know what's going to catch, who's going to see what. And I think a lot of times on social media, quantity can eventually lead to higher quality. And that's definitely been my experience. And so, what I mean by that is, I believe if you go to my page, I've posted over 1,000, well over 1,000 videos and posts at this point. The first, three, four, 500 didn't result in anything significant. I think I had a couple thousand followers, maybe it was 4 or 5 thousand followers, which is significant. Don't get me wrong, but that wasn't translating to a whole lot of business for me at that point in time. Fast forward to maybe post 7 or 800. I'm not doing anything very differently. Maybe I've upped the quality over time. I've hired a videographer for a shoot here and there. I've honed in the craft of putting out a message that is authentic to me, and one of them takes off and I go from 5,000 followers to 10,000. And then a month later, I hit another one and it goes from 10,000 to 30,000 followers. And then, a week later, I hit a third and it goes from 30,000 to 39,000 followers. And, the path up has been very non-linear, but I have noticed with more eyeballs, more engagement, more attention, that I have been able to drive more people toward coaching. And I don't think that's a coincidence. However, I'll rewind and say that I don't think it takes all those eyeballs. I don't think it takes those crazy numbers to convert a good amount of clients to coaching, or people to coaching clients. And this one example that I believe I've shared with you, Rob, is a perfect example of how showing up authentically on social media can make a big difference. And so I had this person hop on a call with me. We got to the end of the call and they said, "Hey, I want to work with you." I said, "Awesome. If you don't mind me asking, what was the reason that you decided to work with me now? Because I believe we've been connected for a few years." And they said, "Yeah, I always thought you were really hardcore, David Goggins ish, up at 3:30, 4 in the morning, you work out every day, no excuses, discipline, so on and so forth." And then I saw a video of you flipping eggs. And for people listening, I went through this phase a couple of years ago where I would just flip eggs, slow motion. I would blindfold myself. I'd spin around in the kitchen and catch them. And it was just fun and it was goofy and whatever, but it was me. And he said, "I saw a video of you flipping eggs and I realized you're just a normal person." And I said, "So let me get this straight. You've been following me for 3 years. We've communicated. You thought I was maybe too hardcore. And then you saw this one video of me flipping eggs and you thought I should reach out to Joe and let's work together." And he thought about it and he said, "Yeah, pretty much." And in that moment, I realized how important it was to just show up on social media and share everything, right? Share the goofy, share the good, share the education, share the motivation, because you never know who's watching. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet and you can ask that question, is I think that in the world we live in, people's attention is very much in their phone on social media. And so we all have this opportunity as creators, if you want to be a creator, to have that FaceTime with people, right? To be on someone's screen for however many minutes, however many seconds a day, talking to them, sharing with them, adding value to them. And when people spend time with you, even virtually through social media, they begin to form a relationship with you in their mind. They begin to build trust. And that's why I think consistency is so important, because you are essentially building relationships with the people who are watching your content.
Yeah, I think the term for that is parasocial relationships. And I know that on like a much different side that can get very unhealthy, like extremely unhealthy. But I think on our side it's very cool, and you do a great job of it. Something that I think I forgot who it was, but someone who told the guy that who I had on last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess, when this is posted, something that he said was you need to be talking. Like you need
Mm.
to physically be talking to your audience. Can't just post. You have to physically look at your camera and speak. And that will like absolutely drive up, maybe not engagement or whatever, but people are going to start seeing a little bit more of authenticity from that rather than just like, oh, I'm going to do a Q&A and answer in, the create story mode, right? Where I want to kind of move that to. Sorry, you have something to say?
I was just gonna say I'll jump in real quick because it's funny and it does tie into your first question. Is I remember studying for my board exam. So this is 2018, 2019. We're at a coffee shop in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Light snow outside. I remember this like it's yesterday. I had never posted a video of me talking on my story before. And so I take a break from studying. I walk outside. There's this nice brick wall. There's snow falling. I feel like I look good, whatever. Um, and I hold my phone up selfie style and I start to record a talking story. I must have talked into the camera and recorded 30 different videos before I just thought, you know what, none of these, this is just too awkward. Let me put it away and I'm not going to do this. So I went back inside, studied. The next day, I talked myself into just posting something, talking to the camera. And I started to build confidence from there. And I started posting more and talking more to the camera, sharing more of myself that way. And that definitely did lead to a boost in engagement. So I do want to just second that. I think that is important for people who want to build a relationship with their audience.
Yeah. But before building a relationship with social media audiences, I think that the emphasis and this is something that's come up, multiple times in the powerlifting world, needs to initially be on local audience. Like people in your local area need to know who you are before people 7 states away know who you are. Is that a path you had to traverse? I mean, I think obviously being in maybe Philly in the New Jersey area, I assume you were coaching locally primarily at first. I mean, there were online clients, but they were around the same area as you. And with that, what was that transition like from seeing your client base be local, people that you can maybe meet up with? I know that you did in-person sessions as well. I think you still do in-person sessions to then looking at, 50, 75, 100 clients within your team that are spanning the entire country, if not multiple countries.
Yeah. So I did start more local and it grew, throughout the entire country. And even, I've had clients internationally. I think the most memorable experience with that was racking up like a $400 or $500 phone bill from calls to Germany because I didn't realize my plan was not international at the time. And so, yeah, started local. Still, the majority of my clients, I'd say, if you just look at fitness, I'd say 30% are still in the tri-state area. So Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York. And that is for a reason, I think having a presence somewhere, being able to host these workouts, go to runs, be around people in person and build those deeper relationships maybe a little bit more quickly than they can happen on social media has really benefited me in my business. And still to this day, I would say one of the biggest conversions for me from meeting someone to having them as a client is when they come to one of our in-person workouts or runs. It's just the hit rate of converting someone from a new acquaintance to a client is really, really high. And I'm not even trying to do that, but it's this result of a new person coming into this ecosystem, this community where everybody knows me. I get to lead a workout, a run, some sort of fitness experience. And a lot of those people around me are already clients. And so there's some word of mouth, there's some buy in, there's some, people are coming and realizing, oh, this is a thing, this is tangible, and Joe does this thing. So that has been helpful. But to your point of scaling, as things have grown, it brings a number of challenges. And I would say one of the biggest challenges with online coaching is just retention. It's hard to be away physically from people and still keep a very deep, meaningful, consistent relationship when the communication isn't reciprocated all the time in the way that you would like it to be reciprocated. And so, what I mean by that very simple example is I can send out messages every single week to all of my clients. I could personalize those messages. I could add value. I could ask questions. But if somebody doesn't respond to me, then it falls back on me to follow up again with that person. And when you have, 75 to 100 clients, it's hard. And you're laughing because
I
maybe
don't respond. I I leave Joe on red so often, and I feel so bad every time I do it. But I'm like, dude, I'm gonna talk to you tomorrow.
and I'll say this, there's a difference though, because there are people like you, Rob, who I know you're showing up in the world. I'm gonna see you on our next call, not a problem. However, where it becomes more of a challenge, and what I was alluding to is in the world of fitness, right? In order to scale to this point, I'm not meeting every week, every other week, or even monthly with a lot of those fitness clients. It's primarily I'm here if you need me, text me as much as you need. I'll respond to you 100 times in a day if that's what it takes. But we don't have a scheduled call. And so if I don't hear from somebody for 3 weeks in a row and they're not responding to my messages or they're not filling in their training, it's hard as an online coach. And I'm sure you can relate to that, but there's only so much you can do when there's that physical distance and your only line of communication is text, email, or even phone call. It can be tough at times.
Yeah, I think that something that I've seen, which is really funny, it's kind of ironic at the same time, is a lot of people would think the clients that are a little bit more like latched onto you, the people that are hitting you up after every single workout or during every single workout, wanting advice. What should I take next? This move like this, at least in our world, it's like, hey, this was my last warm up. What should my top set be? They're much easier to coach because you can just tell them, like, hey, I need you to learn autonomy. Like, this is something we're going to work on. I want you to only send me stuff after your workout, etc. I think they're much easier to coach then the people that you don't hear, they're radio silence throughout the week. And you're like, okay, hey man, what's going on? Like, how's your workouts going? I see it in your sheet, or maybe I don't see it in your sheet, but like, I would like to get some input before I write the next training block. That'd be nice. What are some strategies that you've personally used outside of just the general? I mean, you send out a text, I think it's every Sunday or Monday,
Mhm.
with a quote and a question, and that's the text I leave you on red with. And sorry. Do you have any other strategies to kind of reach out or to kind of set a standard of communication with those clients that maybe see that as not a natural thing? Some clients are just a little bit more autonomous. They don't see the need to hit you up every day or even every week.
Mhm. Well, I think it gets a little nuanced in my mind because there are so many different kinds of clients. And I'll describe, as an anchor point for the rest of my talking points, I'll describe my ideal fitness client, whether that's on the endurance side, the strength side, or a mix of both, the hybrid stuff. It's somebody who they always track their workouts, right? I could go into their program pretty much at any point throughout the week and everything's updated and they're in that sheet, they're in that program frequently, making adjustments, updating things. And as soon as I text them or ask them a question or reach out to them, they're getting back to me relatively quickly with a somewhat thoughtful response. They don't need much. They just need the knowledge, the guidance, and a bit of accountability. And they work really, really hard with a defined goal, even on top of that. So they have a race coming up or they have something that they want to hit. Those people are ideal. They're really easy for me to manage because one, we operate in the same way. We're both driven, we're both frequent communicators, and we do the work on both ends. It works well. With that being said, there's so many different kinds of people. There are people who don't respond to my messages because they're not good texters. And I didn't know that was a thing until I met my wife. She's not a good texter. I'll watch her, she'll read a text from someone and then she'll close it out and just put her phone down and say, I'll get back to him later. And I'm like, you're not going to get back to him later. You're going to forget about this in 5 minutes, right? There are people like that in the world, and I have to remind myself that that exists. So sometimes I have to remind myself, hey, if this person's not responding to me, it might not be because they're ignoring me or they're falling off or they're whatever, whatever, whatever. They might have just forgot, and that's a possibility. But then there are other people who do need more attention. They need to be, held more accountable. They need more care. And for those people, when I get that sense, I'll reach out and instead of saying, hey, Rob, I see you didn't log your workouts last week. Is everything okay? What's going on? Fill me in. I might say, hey, Rob, I noticed that, I haven't seen your workouts filled in. I'd love to catch up. Let me know when you're around next week for a phone call. And even though I don't have time to touch base on the phone with all of those, let's say 100 clients, I will make time and go out of my way to talk to the people who really feel like they need it in order to pull those people back in terms of communication and also just make sure that they have what they need in terms of feeling cared for. And so it's a lot of reading the room, it's a lot of reading the person, and then utilizing that extra layer of a phone call or a video touch point or an audio message or something additional beyond just text or email to help keep those people close. That's one strategy that I found helpful.
Very cool. I like that a lot. Something that I wanted to ask, and maybe this is a little bit of a harsh turn, I'm not sure, in conversation, but I think you do, and you've emphasized, you do a great job with client retention. Like, I think that you are, I'm not sure if you lose clients on a monthly basis or not. From what I can hear, it doesn't sound like it. Of course, there's always going to be some washout, but it's not like you're losing, 20 clients at a time and then gaining 20 clients back. It's not a revolving door. When it comes to scaling, though, when it comes to specifically client acquisition and using social media or using the Project Endure events that you've talked about before, what are some specific strategies that you've been able to see? I know we've talked about personally, you follow up a lot with clients. You have a full sheet of like, hey, I texted them. I hit them up on DM and they're like a green box or whatever. And then it's like, okay, and then I'll move like the next column is like, I'll hit them up again. And then like I'll text them in 6 months.
Mhm.
Uh is there anything else other than that? If you want to dive into that too, I think that'd be really helpful for my audience because I do have a lot of coaches that listen.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start with leads, which is the system you were referring to is for
Mhm.
leads. And so what I'll do, again, low pressure, no pressure. I'll put stories up from time to time. I have spots open, or if you're interested in learning more, click this button, reach out to me, whatever it is. Anybody who does that, I'm going to follow up with a DM. Anybody who doesn't respond to that DM, I'm going to follow up in a week and another week after that. Usually I'll do 3 follow-ups. And then at that point, if they're reading the follow-ups, I'm going to assume they clicked it by accident or they're just not interested or whatever. Sometimes I don't know. But let's say someone does respond. My next step is to get them on a phone call and to just answer any questions, explain more about what I do, and make sure that they feel like they have all the information they need to either make a decision or to just sit with it, and then I can follow up with them at a later date. I almost always, with very few exceptions, will tell people I don't want you to make a decision on the phone right now. And so I'll also be specific and I'll say, I'm going to follow up with you on Monday, or I'm going to follow up with you on this date, or even like at this time, like in the morning. And then I put it in my calendar. And that's where I use my calendar for everything time management. And if I tell you I'm going to text you at 10 a.m. Eastern next Monday, I'm going to text you at 10 a.m. Eastern next Monday. And I'm going to show you that I can follow up, I can be consistent, I'm thinking about you, and whatever I say, I'm going to do. So I'll follow up with them. If they become a client, awesome. If they need more time, great. In the case of them becoming a client, great, they're a client. In the case of them needing more time or being unsure or not responding, I'm going to put another reminder in my calendar for whatever interval of time feels appropriate. And so some people say, let's follow up next month, or, I'm not sure right now, maybe after the summer, or whatever it is. And I put that reminder in my calendar. And then when that reminder hits 2 months later, 3 months later, whatever it is, I'm following up with a text message. So that's how I convert leads to clients for the most part from a logistics standpoint. And then once people are clients, I follow up frequently, I follow up consistently, I make myself available, and I make it known to clients that I'm available for what they need. I'll use phone calls as needed for fitness clients. For the mindset and business stuff, there are scheduled structured phone calls and Zoom calls that are part of that coaching. So those touch points are built in. My job is to provide the best possible experience to the client, to give them everything that they need and they ask for. And I'm very much a fan of going above and beyond when it makes sense and when it's appropriate. With that being said, I also feel like there's this web, this growing web under the Project Endure umbrella that helps with client retention. And so what I mean by that is, let's say I have 10 new clients. They all start, let's say, January of 2024. They don't know each other, but most of them live in the Northeast. As they're working with me, let's say toward the spring, we have our annual Project Endure event. I will do my best to invite, encourage, and do everything I can to get those people to that event so that I can make those introductions, so that those people can have shared experiences, so that they all get a Project Endure shirt, so they have pictures and videos as memories afterward. And then when it comes to that halfway point in the year, let's say we were all working together for 6 months, it just helps with this feeling of like, hey, this guy's still entered, or this person's part of the team, or, they're still pushing toward their goals. And people tend to stay on for longer because they're part of something bigger. And it's not just Joe and them as the client, but it's Project Endure as a community that's all pushing forward together. So I feel like that community aspect has really helped with client retention. And then I'll also just say, like, I think the podcast has helped a lot as well. Um, Going back to the idea of people spending time with us to build trust, hearing someone's voice for 60 minutes or however long it is, once a week or every other week or once a month, right? That is so helpful in feeling close to your coach or close to the person on the other end of the podcast. And so the community aspect, the podcast, a couple other things, all of those factors together in some weird, complex way that I can't quite measure, I believe have helped a lot with client retention.
It's really cool, man, and I really enjoyed you talking about that because I think that you brought in a couple of things that people don't really speak of. One of them that I think has been a little bit more emphasized though recently is this kind of community-based marketing.
Mm.
And we saw it with BPN when we were there. You know, we've seen it with different run clubs. It's this idea for people that don't know that you're no longer buying into a specific product, you're buying into the community behind the product. And so, for example, with BPN, like we'll use them as an example. Yeah, you might like their pre workout. You might like G1M Sport, which is like their carbohydrate supplement, right? But what a lot of people buy in more from is you like the community. You like the fact that you're able to go if you live in Austin and see these people doing the specific things. Um, is that something that you have kind of switched your mind at, or was that something that you've always just it's come natural? Because I think with maybe your side of things, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I think with your side of things, running coaching, general fitness coaching, etc., I think it's kind of a little bit easier to do than what a lot of my, audience does with powerlifting coaching because people have very set schedules for powerlifting training. Like you don't just change your primary squat day. Like if a client did that, I would not be super happy about it. Maybe one day, plus or minus one day is fine, if you're going to train with friends or whatever. But if you're switching it to the middle of the week, like, dude, what are we doing? I'm not sure if you can think of any ways that maybe are, and I don't want to put you on the spot, that maybe our ways or our side of my audience can start to do that, or if you've seen some strategies from other people, trying to build that community-based marketing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to your point, what I do in the fitness world, running, lifting, just general hybrid fitness, if you want to call it that, it lends itself much better to the community aspect, throw on a workout here, put on a run there, kind of on the whim than powerlifting, I'm sure, hands down. When it comes to the mindset and business stuff, two things that come to mind are one, individual connections between current clients, and then two, like a group atmosphere. In this setting, it's probably going to be virtual. But I'll start with the individual connections. And what I mean by that is, let's say I have two business clients or two mindset clients, or a business client and a mindset client, and we're individually, me and that person and me and the other person are working through challenges and struggles in their own lives. And I'll give a great example. I have a friend, he's not a client, but he's a great friend who recently experienced a miscarriage. Him and his wife experienced a miscarriage, and he's just devastated. And I don't have that experience. I can be there for him. I can, hold space for him, but I can't relate to that directly. And there's only so much I can help with. I have another client who lives in Canada, and him and his wife went through two miscarriages this past year. And I know those two people very, very well. And I can make that introduction and make that connection. And that builds this web, right? It's these interconnections between people I know, between clients to friends, or even friends to friends. And I just get to build that web where eventually everybody's like, oh, how did you meet? It's like, oh, through Joe. Or how did you meet? Oh, through Project Endure. And that web through the individual connections can grow stronger. And then on the other side, I think holding a space for a community or a group is really powerful. Virtually, it's challenging. But what that could look like is, hey, I have 20 mindset clients, or hey, I have 20 powerlifting clients, and schedules are all over the place. But, once a week or once every other week or once a month, I'm going to hold a Zoom call for 90 minutes, 120 minutes, whatever it is. And anybody who's a client of mine can join that. And we can just talk about powerlifting topics. We can talk about life topics. We can talk about whatever we want, but that space is held. And so, one practical way that I've done that is through what I call Team Endure. So this is the second year of Team Endure. And what Team Endure is a group coaching concept where we have 12 to 16 athletes each year. So we did this in 2023, doing it in 2024. We'll do it again in 2025. And those athletes meet once a week on Zoom for an hour with me. And we talk about all different kinds of things, race prep. We bring in guest speakers. You were a guest speaker last year for the group. So we try to add value on different topics. But just life, right? Like, people are going through a job transition. People are experiencing something challenging. To have that group of people who are there with you, and to know that they're all working toward athletic goals, but really deep down, they're also people, that builds a really strong bond. And that team effect, that team approach is really, really powerful for client retention. So I think that could apply to business, to powerlifting, to mindset. But again, it's not easy. I do think it's rewarding though.
Yeah, and a way that I've done that, I think, is through the community calls that I was doing in the spring, which are picking up next month. Thank God, those are back up. Hectic summer, a bunch of travel, but we're back. Not to make excuses or anything, but no, I really really like that, and being a guest on the team in Dirt Call was amazing. It's actually what gave me the idea to then do the community calls, because I was like, okay, wait, let's think here. If you have a guest on, it's going to take you maybe 30 minutes of communication to figure out a good time. And then you're going to be on the call. You're also learning stuff. You're going to be on the call with the team for an hour. It's like your time buy-in compared to the person that is actually hosting the call, or the guest, is lower, which is not always, like, it's normally not the case. It's normally when you have a podcast guest, you're researching them, you're writing questions, etc. You're making sure the conversation flows. When you're meeting up with somebody in person, or meeting up with a group of people for a team workout in person, you're setting up before, you're tearing down after, you're writing the training, etc. It's one of the only ways that you can actually have less time, like,
Mhm.
involved, but have a net positive, which is the inverse of what you would normally think, right? It's,
Mhm.
it's really, really cool. And I think that a lot more people need to maybe hop into that. I also like the idea that you have of just sitting down and saying, like, hey, pushing out a Zoom link to your clientele on a whim and being like, hey guys, I'm going to be in this Zoom call for 2 hours. I'm just writing training. You know, if anybody wants to pop in and ask questions or go through their sheet and hear me talk through my thoughts of why they're doing stuff, come in. Like, there's no reason that you can't. And one way that I've thought recently that I might explore, actually, is, streaming
Hmm.
my programming time.
Hmm.
So if I know that I have a big block of, like, maybe 4 or 5 clients that I need to work through in a Saturday afternoon, or a Friday afternoon, why couldn't I hop on Twitch or hop on X or hop on whatever, Instagram Live? I'm not sure if you can screencast on that. Why couldn't I hop on that, stream, talk through my thoughts? I'm writing them down anyway in a note sheet. It takes how much more effort to actually speak them, and go through my thought process of programming new clients, or programming, between clients. And so I think there is a way for the powerlifting side to see this sense of community marketing. I think we have to be a little bit more, creative with it, obviously, because, again, holding the group workouts is a little bit harder unless you own a gym or anything like that. Like, I know Corrupted Strength in Houston, before they closed down, they had Corrupted Saturdays, where they would do a discounted day pass to, I think, like $5 or $10.
Mhm.
Um, and they were able to build a community through Russ's audience and people around Houston that were into powerlifting. And maybe they couldn't afford a membership there all the time, but on a Saturday, a big training session, they were able to come in and train with people that they see on social media and that they look up to. So I think that's really, really cool. And I think that there's a lot of, like, very creative ways that people can do that. um Something you talked about earlier that I want to hop back into is, you talked about slotting stuff into that Google Calendar. Me and you are both big GCal people. Very, very big GCal people. I mean, you and I, like, as soon as we have a date, there is an email with a Google Calendar
Mhm.
invite. And people that have set up inquiry calls with me, or, like, one-on-one calls with me, will know, like, within seconds of getting the confirmation text, it's like, boom, there is something put in. You are invited. Here's the Zoom link. What does that look like for you? If you want to just dive into, I don't know if I can make you a host and you can look at, I'm not going to do that, but if you can, kind of
Yeah.
dive into what your GCal looks like in general.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. Yeah, I use Google Calendar for everything, and I'll take you through today.
Yeah, just take
It's
me through a
just
day in the life of Joe Rinaldi.
amazing. All right. So today's a Tuesday. I woke up at 3:30. I went to the gym. I walked on the treadmill while I journaled. I journal on my phone in a Google document. That way I can do it from anywhere. So did that, worked out, came home, took the dog for a walk. All of that is done by 6 a.m. Made some coffee, ate some food, sat on the couch with my wife. We watched some Yankees Phillies highlights. I'm a Yankees fan. She's a Phillies fan. Yankees won. They crushed the Phillies.
There we go.
Um, so
I'm
did
a
that.
Nationals fan, so I fucking hate the Phillies.
Yeah, there we go. So we did that. I showered. Now I'm sitting here, 7 to 8:30. We're recording this podcast. 8:30 to 9, I have a phone call with a client just to touch base on some life stuff. Good example of someone who does their work I don't need to stay on top of, but it's just been a while and they've been a client for a long time and I just want to catch up with them. So I'm going to do that as I drive across town in those 30 minutes. I'll be on the phone with my headphones in. I'll drive across town. I have back-to-back clients at the same location, in person, personal training. So I'll do those two clients. I will then hop on another phone call now from 11 to 11:30 as I drive back home. I'll get home. I have 30 minutes of downtime where I'll walk the dog, I'll shovel down some food, I'll get back on my computer. And from noon until 5 p.m., I have client calls straight through, no breaks. Now, granted, I look at my calendar, and even though things are blocked for an hour at a time, I know like, hey, this client's always 5 minutes late, or like this call always ends, a couple minutes early. So I know where I'm going to go to the bathroom. I know where I'm going to refill my coffee. Like I got that planned. Then 5 p.m. hits. I got 15 minutes to get in my car, drive across town again, train one more in-person client. Then I get home at 6:30 tonight, and this is pretty rare, but at 6:30 I don't have anything else for the evening. So I'll likely get some stuff ready for tomorrow, walk the dog again, shower, and then my hope is to be in bed slash asleep by 8:30 so I can get up tomorrow and do it all again.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, I think that's crazy. I mean, I see it. I know it. I live it. But I think for a lot of people, they're seeing that wake up time is the one thing. Have you always been an early riser? Is that something that's come natural to you, or is it just like you were just like one day, dude, I'm so tired of waking up at 9 a.m. Like I gotta stop. That's where I'm at right now, where I'm like, I'm so tired of waking up at 7.
Mm-hmm.
I need to just commit to the 4 a.m. We've talked about like I need some Jocko Willink in my ear on some mornings, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But is that something that came natural to you?
It has. I mean, I'll say this. I think everything is a blessing and a curse, right? There are positives and negatives to every single thing. For the life of me, on very rare occasion, as the exception, I just can't sleep in. I used to get up at 5:36 as a child to watch Pokemon.
Let's
You
go.
know, I'd like walk into my parents' room and I'd poke my mom on the shoulder and ask her if I could go downstairs and watch Pokemon. And so my parents would always tell me, just wait until you're a teenager, wait until, you got to get up early and go to school and you don't want to, and this and that. And, that never happened. I never had trouble getting up. I actually got up earlier progressively as I got older. And now part of the reason I wake up at 3:30 is yes, my schedule is so busy and to fit everything in, I just need to be awake for a few more hours. But two, I genuinely love it. I mean, that time in the morning from let's say 3:30 to 6, very few text messages are being exchanged. The world for the most part is still asleep, and I get that peace. I could do whatever I want. I can think. I don't have to worry about who's texting me, who needs me, etc. I could just be, and that's really powerful for me. And so even though some would argue, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree, that maybe an extra hour or two of sleep would be a good thing, most days, the pure peace that I get at 3:34 a.m. is worth the trade-off of an hour less sleep. And I'll just share a funny quick story because I was telling someone yesterday, when I walk to my car at 3:30 in the morning, like sometimes it's cold, my hood is up, I'm not thinking about anything except just getting to my car. And I'll occasionally see someone like on the other side of the street or wherever, also walking outside at 3:30 in the morning. And I just think to myself, like, man, what a creep. Like, what is this? Like, who is this freak outside at 3:30 in the morning? And then I have to remind myself, like, oh no, that's me too.
Yeah.
Um, and then one more quick thing on the calendar. I didn't mention this, but it is in here, so I should say it. At 6:30 tonight, there's a block in my calendar that says time with my wife. And that's important for me to have in my calendar because I'm such a firm believer that how we spend our time, it shapes who we become, and how we spend our time and our calendar should reflect what's important to us. And if I didn't have that block in my calendar, I would still make time for my wife, but for whatever weird reason in my head, it would be easier to let work just continue to bleed over into the night. Because when I see that block on my schedule, it feels clean. It feels like it's supposed to be there, and I can relax a little bit more knowing that I'm doing what I said I would do. So I even schedule things in like that, such as time with my wife.
Yeah. it's actually that's something that I wanted to talk about maybe a little bit as we end the podcast is how you've been able to keep up with personal relationships with this, you know, with this schedule. Obviously it's something that we've talked about, and me and my future wife Paulina have discussed, and it's something that I personally struggle with more than anything. I feel like I'm a pretty good coach. I feel like, I'm a pretty good, spouse to Paulina, but I know that there's that disconnect between me and her where she's able to turn it off and I don't think I am. Is that something that you guys, and I don't want to, dive into too much personal stuff if you're not, willing to talk about it. But is that something that you guys had to work through where you're just like, "Hey, by the way, I'm never really off the clock. Like I need you to understand that."
Oh, I'll talk about it. Yeah. No, it's hard for me. So we got married in 2020 and it was a small wedding because of COVID, but we went on our honeymoon a year later in 2021 and we went to Maui. And I'll never ever forget this because it's a bit ridiculous in a funny way now, but we're out to dinner in Maui on our honeymoon, happily married, sitting at a sushi restaurant and overlooking the beach, and the sun is setting and it's beautiful. And actually recorded a podcast with my wife probably 2 years ago, and we talked about this, but she started crying, and she's trying to hold back tears, but she's clearly crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Like, is everything okay? Like, kind of came out of nowhere. And she was just like, I'm just afraid like we're never going to be able to take a vacation and you're never going to be able to relax. And because to that point on that vacation, I was getting ready to leave my job. Literally, when we got back, I was going to give my 4 weeks notice at my job and start Project Endure. I had a lot on my mind. I wanted to work out. I just couldn't sit still. And there was this very big disconnect between where she was, and she just wanted to be on the beach and relax and enjoy this beautiful place. And I'm preoccupied with checking in with my clients and mentally preparing to enter this next chapter. And that was a funny example in hindsight of something that is really hard for me, which is slowing down and relaxing and just being present. And I'm happy to say that over the past 3 years, 3.5 years, I've gotten a lot better at that. And I think what's allowed me to get better at that is one, realizing how important that is, because truly, we don't know how much time we have left at any given day. We could be seeing someone or talking with someone for the very last time and we might not know it. And so I try to make every interaction meaningful and truly be present with that thought in mind. But two, it helps me to know that like when I'm working, I'm going to work really, really, really hard. And just from hearing my schedule, I mean, if you count the workout, which to me feels like work at times, I'm working for 12, 14 hours a day on paper, like that's enough, So like when I get to 6 p.m., when I get to 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., when I'm done working, I try to compartmentalize and tell myself, like, you did an awesome job today with the block that you had for work. And now work is over and it's time to just be present and be a husband and be a dog dad and just be a
Mm-hmm.
human. So it's not perfect. It's gotten better, but I think the communication between my wife and I has been the most helpful part. Just understanding that what I want is not always what she wants, and that more is not always better when it comes to work and money and business. And so it's a work in progress. I struggle with it still, but I'm getting better. And I think that trajectory is what's most important. And I'm proud of how far I've come over the past couple of years.
That's really cool, man, and I'm really glad you shared that because obviously Paulina and I share the same sentiment. I mean, I was up in Dallas this last weekend, and we actually got into, I wouldn't say a fight, but a decent argument. She might not want me mentioning this, but I'm going to talk about it. Pretty decent argument where she was finishing her water or something. We're at this like spa World Springs thing where it's like a bunch of mineral baths and saunas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm putting my phone in the locker. I'm not touching it. Like, she'll enjoy that. She'll like, everything will be okay. Like, she doesn't see me working. It's a Sunday afternoon. We can just relax. When in reality, I didn't even know that between us going to these different things, I was rushing her. She was like, I just want to finish my water. I don't want it to get warm as it sits by the pool. And I was like, come on, let's go. Like, we need to go now. And she's like, dude, like, relax. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to relax. Like, I'm trying to train you. And I kind of, somewhat, I didn't blow up in her face, but I was like, you're treating me like a 7-year-old or something like that. but it was for good reason. And looking back
Mhm.
on it, it was for super good reason
Mhm.
because she's teaching me how to do that relaxation. She's like, I need to train you for when we go on our honeymoon because I cannot have you like this on our honeymoon. I will lose my effing mind if you're like this on our honeymoon. So you
Yeah.
mentioning on your honeymoon, that happening and her being afraid,
Mm.
again, in the moment, looking back on it, it's kind of funny, but I'm sure that was a tough conversation to have. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
that it almost scared you a little bit of like, oh, I need to look intrinsically and see like, what can I do to make sure that I'm present for her? Because while
Mhm.
she might, work, Paulina will work 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, whatever, at a vet, and once she's done, she's done. You know, I need to be able to learn how to turn it off.
Yeah. Well, I'll say two things. One, well, three things. One, thank you for sharing because that is very relatable, not just for me, but I would imagine for a lot of
Yeah,
people out there who are very driven. Two, I had an experience recently. 2 weeks ago, we were at the beach with my family for a long weekend. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we're checking out of the Airbnb on Saturday. And in my mind, that means we're checking out, we're maybe grabbing breakfast, and we're coming home. And then I'm doing some work or I'm working out, I'm doing things that I want or need to do. In her mind, it was like, oh, we check out and we hang at the beach and we get some food and we really soak in this last full day. And there was a lot of tension that morning and we couldn't figure it out. And then afterward, we realized, hey, like we had totally different visions and expectations of what this day was going to be. And so I think to that point, it's important to communicate and just to talk. And even as silly as it sounds, like, hey, we're going on a trip. Like, what are your expectations? What do you want out of this? How do you see this going in an ideal world? It sounds silly to have that kind of conversation beforehand about something that's supposed to be relaxing and enjoyable and downtime. But I do think that's important. And then third, um, like I feel like to provide for whatever reason, there's this internal drive that like I need to grow the business. I need to make more money. I need to do X, Y, Z. But deep down, I know that providing well for my wife and our future family really doesn't involve just more of that. It means like being present and like, being there as a husband and a dad someday. And like that thought, even though it makes logical sense and emotional sense, still feels hard. And so I know that that next chapter of someday, hopefully having a family, et cetera, that's going to be challenging in a whole new way. And I'm preparing for that, but still living in the present. And so I'll throw that out there because it's kind of the next thing that's up for me is I think, being a business owner and a husband and I hope a dad.
yeah, no, that's beautiful, man, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I don't want to say, you said I don't want to think about the future of being a business owner or anything like that, but I'm gonna ask. I think this is a very good place to maybe end the podcast and end our conversation. But before we end, I want to ask, what does the future for Project Endure look like? I know that you guys are gearing up for the Philly Marathon. You guys are doing some really, really cool stuff. I know that in the past, you got the guy running with the flag, etc. Let me know about that. And I won't dive
Yeah.
too far into it, so you can talk about it. But let me know what the future of Project Endure for the next maybe 3 to 6 months looks like.
I love that you gave that timeline because in my mind, something I'm leaning into as well is that the long term is just a collection of short terms. And so over this next short term season, next 3 to 6 months, Philadelphia Marathon is big for us. So we have two people this year running with flags. So full like 3 foot by 5 foot flags over the shoulder on a PVC pipe. We'll have two of those going through the marathon at different paces. Everyone who wants to run with a Project Endure shirt will get a free Project Endure shirt. My hope is to have a bigger presence at the marathon this year so that people can see the name, see the brand, and just feel the energy. We'll have a cheer station, we'll have confetti cannons, the megaphone, refreshments, flags, a big crowd. So I'm excited for that. And I'm also extra excited because my wife, Michaela, is running her first marathon and
Let's go.
she'll be in that crowd. So
Fuck
that's the
yeah,
next,
dude.
yeah,
That's awesome.
it'll be cool. And that's another thing that I don't talk about enough, but through me building this and doing what I do, I've noticed her, working harder and being a bit more disciplined and growing in her own way, without me pressuring or forcing any of that. And it's just been cool to witness. Which is probably the best byproduct of Project Endure, to be honest, is watching people close to me go and do hard things. And so, yeah, Philadelphia Marathon's huge. And then we'll start the planning process for our 2025 event. So that'll likely happen sometime in April 2025, but we'll start the planning process pretty much as soon as the Philadelphia Marathon is over. And the goal is to have a bigger crowd, a better experience, and even more energy this year. So stay tuned for that. And then if I had to zoom out long term beyond the next 3 to 6 months, because I do get this question, and the honest answer is I don't know what things look like. I think it's just more of a feeling that I'm pursuing at this point. And the feeling is, meaningful relationships, fulfilling experiences, being able to help a lot of people, and also mold that in a way that fits my lifestyle and also serves me and my family. And so long term, I'm chasing a feeling. Short term, we've got the marathon and the event. And that's where we sit at the moment.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I think that's a great way to end this out. For anybody that's interested in, looking at what Joe does, all of your links are going to be in the description of the YouTube and description of, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of stuff. So you can go check out Project Endure website, his Instagram, his, the Project Endure page. All of it is really cool stuff. You're definitely somebody that I look up to in this space as a coach. And honestly, as a husband and a person as well, because you I think it was really cool that the first thing you talked about yourself was that you're like, I am not just a coach. I am, before all of that, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a dog dad, etc. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you. I think the only way to end this is the way that we end all of our calls, which is with a good old camera fist bump. So to everybody listening, maybe you can fist bump your phone. I don't know, but we're about to do that. Appreciate you, Joe. I love talking to you, and I hope we can maybe have you on the podcast sometime soon again.
I would love that, Rob. It's been an honor. Appreciate
Yeah,
you,
man.
man. Boom.
There we go.